turnovers, penalties, and a last-second drive as the Indianapolis Colts lose 17-16 in a heartbreaker. And I guess the question needs to be asked, is it time to raise the white flag? And to do that, we brought on Kent Sterling, the always energetic, the always passionate, Indiana fan, to kind of settle these things out. How you been, Kent?
I've been good. How are you, Zach?
I'm doing very, very well. Thanks for coming on. And I guess we'll just dive right in like we always do. Just your initial overall thoughts and reaction from the game yesterday as the Colts lose. Really a heartbreaker, Kent.
Yeah, there were some things I just don't understand about the game. What happened on Jalen Hurts? Kind of, the seas parted and he was able to just kind of waltz into the end zone. I don't understand that. That would seem to be like job one is stopping Hurts. I don't understand Deion Jackson running out of bounds. And what was Matt Ryan doing throwing to him? I don't understand that. I don't understand Chase McLaughlin missing a kick. There are just some things like everything had to go wrong for the Colts not to win this game. JT had to put it on the ground. Zaire Franklin came back and punched it loose. That was good. There was good and bad in almost equal measure. But when you're a team that's not put together necessarily to win, you wind up losing. And I think that kind of explains it as well as anything.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's just basically just a microcosm of who we've been all year long. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, one play away, one penalty if you didn't do this. But I would have to say over a long duration of a season, Kent, if you don't make those penalties and you don't make those plays and those costly turnovers, you probably aren't talking about these things, ultimately when it comes right down to it. Question for you. The narrative of Jeff Saturday is what if we win that football game yesterday on the national narrative? I think it's probably pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I think that the story, the little synopsis would be simple is better. I think that Frank Reich tended toward the clever, and clever coaches better have a team that can function and execute its simple stuff too. And they didn't. So the clever really went wrong. Jeff came in, kind of pared down the playbook, made it make sense to the guys, made it so they could repeat and get good at the execution of a few things. And I think that if they win yesterday, all of a sudden he looks like a very good coach and looks like a guy who was exactly the right guy at the right moment to lead this ship back to respectability. But they lost. And so we're left with a lot of questions.
Yeah, bottom line business. There's no doubt about that. I think my opinion hasn't changed, honestly, Kent, on Jeff. I think it's been a pleasant surprise. I was probably glass half empty when it came to doing that in mid-season like that. But he has been a really just, you mentioned it earlier, simple is better. When it comes right down to it, lean on your strengths. That's been a really, really kind of a refreshing thing to see for us. That being said, just not good enough, when it comes right down to it. And it comes down to winning that football game. You had to get one stop, and you mentioned it earlier, the parting of the Red Seas with Jalen Hurts. Who's that on? Is that on the players? Is that on the coach? Is that just on everybody in general?
The front looked so different to me when they got to the line of scrimmage. I looked at my wife and said, uh-oh. And then you've got Bobby Okereke who's stuck with the back, stuck with Boston Scott instead of cheating to kind of shadow Hurts. And then Franklin is on the tight end. And so you wound up with no linebackers and the interior of the Philadelphia offensive line pushed Buckner and Stewart aside and created that gap. The safeties were in the end zone. And so the middle was open. The first thing you've got to do in football is you've got to defend the middle.
Yeah.
And Chris Ballard will tell you that. You defend from the inside out. That's how he's built the team. He's got two really good defensive tackles. He normally has a linebacker in position to clean up when they get blocked. And that's just the way that works. And it didn't work that way on that one play. And you thought there was a previous fourth down. And I really thought, okay, if you can get off the field on this fourth down, you've earned the win. whoever wins this play, the football game is 60 minutes, but it's going to come down to a play where you've got to execute. And whoever wins that play is going to win that game. And it seemed like that fourth down play was exactly that time.
Yeah, I mean, I looked over at my wife while we were at the game, and I said, this feels so much like the Commanders game right now on that final drive. I said, I can just feel it in my body, like what's happening right now. She's like, no, not possible. And I said, I'm telling you, I mean, it just feels like that. For a defense who played very, very well in a football game, probably as well as you could hope, to play when you talk about a guy like Jalen Hurts. Where are you at with Chris Ballard? I know that there's been a lot of talk with the construction and all of this. There's plenty of blame to go around. And I think that probably starts ownership down, really. I mean, if you want to put your hands in on it. But with Chris Ballard, I'm just interested and curious your thoughts with him.
I think he's got a tremendous system, and I think it's a smart system of evaluation, investigation, and then selection. And I think it's really smart. But what I think where Chris makes a mistake is believing that dogma is physics. And he believes that you've got to build from the inside out. I believe that you've got to build a balanced roster. You've got to have good offensive linemen, but you've got to have good wide receivers. You've got to have good defensive linemen. You got to have really good cornerbacks and good safeties. And so I think, all things in moderation, you've got to build in a moderate way, take the best player available. And if you need to go get a wide receiver to be dynamic and a playmaker like the Eagles did, look, Howie Roseman's really smart. Yeah. He's got a terrific offensive line. We saw that yesterday. His defensive line really wasn't very good. So what did he go do? He went out and signed Ndamukong Suh, and Suh really was a heavy leverage guy in determining the victory yesterday in that game. But he's also got A.J. Brown, and he's got Devontae Smith, and he's got guys, and he went out and got a guy like Jalen Hurts, who he believed in as a second rounder. And this team has come together around him. They got a terrific defensive front, at least on the edge. Fletcher Cox has been a mainstay of that thing for a long time. This is really a pretty good team and not a great run defense. So they went out and addressed it. And I think that Chris is one of those guys where he wants to reward his own. Yeah. And plugging holes during the season or plugging holes during free agency is not his want. And it needs to be. You need to balance between draft and free agency. You need to build through the draft, but then you need to augment what you've built through free agency, and that's just not the way he's built. And if he can't adjust, if he can't edit himself to understand that it's his limitations that have caused this, and sell that vision to Jim Irsay as an updated, like a Chris Ballard 2.0, I think he gets fired.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget a couple of years ago with the Phillip Rivers press conference at the end of the season. It always stuck down, and I wrote these notes down. He said, if I select a quarterback in the draft, you guys will run me right out of town. Well, the irony in all of that is by not selecting a quarterback in the draft, you might get ran out of town. I mean, when it all comes down to it, most important position in football, Chris Ballard's a smart man. I'm not going to sit here and act like he doesn't know that. But what do you think's been the hesitation for him when it comes to addressing that, not from a veteran standpoint, from going out and saying, listen, I know we're going to have to give up a lot. That's part of football. That's why all of these football teams give up so much to move up in the draft, because they know what can happen if you hit on the right guy. What do you think it is about him that just made him think, I just don't want to do it that way?
I think he's stubborn. I think he's arrogant. I think he's insecure. The quote that you shared from Chris Ballard, you guys will run me out of town. That's one instance of insecurity. Another is his continued nattering against Kevin Bowen. Kevin Bowen asked a really good question about receivers early this season, might even have been in camp. And Chris bristled then, and he keeps bringing it up and bringing it up. And when they had it was 2 weeks ago tonight,
Yeah.
when they introduced Jeff Saturday, and it's Ballard and Irsay and Saturday. And Ballard looked about as uncomfortable as Ryan Grigson did when they had the wonderful Kumbaya kind of media availability where Pagano and Grigson were joined at the hip until they were no longer joined at the hip.
Yeah.
But you've got a guy who keeps seeing people shooting at him rather than understanding that he's kind of bulletproof if he chooses to be. And this is like one of two things is going to happen here. One possibility is that Jeff Saturday has a really impactful kind of presence in that building, and Chris Ballard develops a little bit of Saturday's confidence and swagger, his confidence in who he is. Like Jeff Saturday, I've known since 2002 when we hired him at WIBC to do morning show hits throughout the season. And nobody knew who Jeff Saturday was then, but the minute he walked into the room, he's just got this presence where he's just going to be him. And that works really well in radio. So like immediately you hire the guy to do that. And he's still that same guy. He's very much who he is and very confident in who he is. And I think Chris Ballard is a little bit – Chris Ballard is very similar to Ryan Grigson in that realm, where both those guys are very, very prickly to criticism.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and that's probably to be expected, Kent. You know, when you have that position, you're going to get all of it thrown at you. I just don't understand this notion of, you know, definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. For some reason, he's just not been willing to budge in his approach. Now, he'll tell you that he's been willing to, you know, to budge in his approach, but we all know a little better than that. You know, at this point, I mean, it's been a large enough sample size. He really hasn't taken a chance. And I think one of the biggest and the hardest things for a general manager in the NFL to do is take a chance on himself. You know, you mentioned him being a little bit insecure earlier. Just believing in, I know that there's a chance that this doesn't turn out, but the ramifications from not getting the most important player on the football field are so large that I'm going to have to take a chance. If you're sitting here this time next year, Kent, is Chris Ballard our general manager?
I'd be really surprised. It seems like kind of that end of days sort of progression has started. And once those dominoes start to fall, they are really, really hard to stop. I think that it's going to take kind of a pivot by Ballard and an effective communication of that pivot to Irsay in order to save his job. And he may decide, and he may have already decided, that he's wheels up. Yeah. That, you know, he doesn't want to work with Jim Irsay anymore. He doesn't want to work for Jim Irsay anymore. When Jim Irsay kind of stood up, banged his fist on the table and said Carson Wentz has got to go, that reflected a lack of trust that I'm sure Chris Ballard took personally. Frank Reich took it personally. And once you start to have that kind of difference of opinion, yeah, and the owner deciding that he's going to override the general manager, all of a sudden it becomes a really toxic workplace. And I'd be surprised whether Ballard's back. He's going to wait to get fired because he's under contract through 26. Yeah. So he's going to walk away with a lot of money, just like Frank Reich did.
Yeah, I was telling somebody a conversation. Actually, I was talking to Kevin Bowen last week when he was on the show, and I said the money's not in walking away. You know what I mean? No matter how much you have to deal with and no matter how much you have to put up with via media, small-time podcasters like myself, I mean, the money's in staying around and then Jim Irsay having to make a decision and letting him go. That decision might be up to Jeff Saturday. You know, who knows that understanding when it comes right down to it.
They could flip the construct, and a lot of franchises work that way. The Rams did in St. Louis when I was there, where Jeff Fisher helped select the general manager, and then Les Snead answered to Jeff Fisher. You know, he did Jeff's bidding. That could work out here with Saturday as the head coach and a GM coming in to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's as far as contracts. That could absolutely happen. I think it's really interesting, and I think one thing that shouldn't be overlooked is that Chris Ballard is really, really loyal to his guys. And you've got Ed Dodds, Morocco Brown, and that whole staff of scouts. And Chris knows that by sticking in that position, he can protect his guys. And there's a strong gravity toward doing that when you're in middle management, as Chris Ballard is. I mean, you've got upper management with the Colts. That's Irsay. You've got middle manager, which is everybody else, everybody else on the staff. And Ballard is going to do his best, because he's a good man at heart, to keep that group of people protected as long as he possibly can. We'll see how long that is.
Yeah, it'll be a very, very interesting. Hey, Kent, before we get off here, I may have another question here on the back end, though. Let everybody know where they can find you. If you don't know where Kent Sterling's at, I mean, Breakfast with Kent is awesome. I mean, we do it every single day. We just think, man, what a great positive way to wake up and just talk. Just watch, all things Indiana sports. Pretty cool. But just going to give you a few seconds to let everybody know where they can find you if they haven't already.
Sure. The YouTube channel is Kent Sterling, at Kent Sterling on Twitter. You can go to kentsterling.com. I try to make it easy. Helps me to remember that it's just my name. And we do live videos every morning at 7-ish, like 6:58, 7:02, whatever. And then in the afternoon, either as news breaks or right about 4 o'clock, and talk for 15, 20 minutes and kind of have a good time. I dig the back and forth, that you have with comments and whatnot. Yeah. It's just, it's fun. It's a great way for me to start the day too.
For sure, man. Every one of those interactions are pretty cool. We do Wednesday live streams, 9:15 Eastern time. And that's probably our favorite time, honestly, on this show, just to have that. Indiana really does have, we're lucky here when we have really good, knowledgeable sports fans. I know a lot of people, you got a little bit of this and a little bit of that when it comes to it. Indiana, all in all, is a pretty good town, and state to talk sports with when it comes to that. One last question for you before you hop off.
Sure.
As far as our direction moving forward as the season goes, do you think we're just about, I mentioned that white flag in the intro, are we just about one more loss away is what I'm saying? One more loss and you wave the white flag. Where are you at with that?
I don't think that you tank, if that's what you're asking. I don't think you do that no matter what. I mean, Colts didn't do it in 2011. They kept trying to find ways to win, and they played hard. I think there's one way to play football, and that's hard. And what you're asking, if you ask a team to tank, you're asking them to go against what has fueled every fiber of their being since they began playing football as a peewee. And it can really be corrosive and toxic to the entire organization to tank. And that there's a taint to that lasts. I don't think that they're going to tank no matter what. If they roll into week 18, 17th game against the Texans at Lucas Oil Stadium, and they're a loss away from moving up to maybe 5th in the draft or a win away from being 12th, there's no chance those guys go out on the field and tank it, because they're playing for jobs too.
Sure.
And Saturday, I think he likes being a coach. So he'd like to be a coach again. And if it's not with the Colts, he'd like to do it for someone else. So, there's nothing in an NFL organization, and the NBA is different. But in the NFL, you got to compete. These guys are putting their lives. I worked with a guy named DeMarco Farr, who is an all-pro defensive tackle for the Rams. And I asked him, what are you thinking? Like, you're in the tunnel, you're about to come out on the field. What's going through your head? And he's a great guy, wonderful guy. And DeMarco said that this may be the last time I walk. Wow. I'm going to go out on that field, and I'm putting my ability to walk at risk for my brothers on this team. There is no chance that people who think like that are going to go onto that field and think anything other than I'm going to fight my ass off to try to win this game. It's my health at risk. I am not going to sacrifice potentially my health in order to lose so somebody can get drafted over the top of me and I lose my job. That's not the way these guys are built. They're not going to play that way. We can talk about tanking and whether it's logical or not, whether you can get a franchise quarterback or not through tanking, but that is not the way the organization's wired. It's not the way Jim Irsay works. It's not, I guarantee you, the way those 53 players on the active roster work.
There you go, man. So, You heard it here first, Kent Sterling. No white flag going to be waved on West 56th. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, like, rate, review, share, and subscribe. We're over 2,000 subscribers now. Super happy with every interaction that we've had with you. And until next time, this has been After Further Review. Kent, thank you so much for hopping on today, man.
Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely.